I would also welcome to my other colleague here. There is Mrs. Yanti. Hello, she is my partner in this class. And then Mr. Bangun. Mr. Bangun, hello. Where are
Hello.
you? Okay.
Oh, you've disappeared there.
Sorry, Pak Bangun. Maybe Bu Susana has trouble in her connected
Right.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe for making short the time, so it's better Prof Sutter to start the class.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Please, Professor Shutter.
Okay. Can I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Already co-host.
Let me see. Desktop one. Here we go.
Mohon siapa itu yang di-mute kan?
Can you see that?
Yes, clear.
Is that all good?
Yes, good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to join with you. And I'm very pleased to be able to join your class around the smart city and thinking about the smart city. So I really, what I'd like to talk about today is a particular aspect of that idea, or some particular aspects of that idea, and how we engage with those aspects of the smart city. And in particular, thinking about recording, representing and reimagining and the process of digital modelling in the smart city. So digital modelling, particularly of the physical circumstance of the smart city. So I just wanted to start by revisiting some ideas about the smart city and thinking about it. So this is a particular definition that comes from the Smart Cities Council, their online site. And one of the things that it starts with, and it emphasises, which I think is incredibly important, is that the whole idea of a smart city is to enhance its livability, workability and sustainability. So it's not an issue about technology itself, it's really an issue about people and their engagement with the city. And the way it does that is collecting information through sensors or other types of systems. And indeed, you know, one of the things that I'll be talking about today is that collecting of information, what I will call recording, but particularly in relation to the physical aspect of the city. Then it communicates that data using wired or wireless networks. And then thirdly, we can analyse that data to understand what's happening and what's likely to happen next. And both of those, I think, are important ideas. But particularly this idea of livability, workability and sustainability. It's about people. More than anything, we're concerned about the lives of the people that live in the city and how we make it better for the people that live in those environments. So this is a view of the central part of Brisbane. And it's a very active area. It's a mall, and There are a lot of people that use this space, but you can see, and I guess you have the same circumstance in Semarang, that the physical environment is incredibly important. So recording, collecting data, you know, the normal definition or the normal idea about the smart city is this idea that smart devices are logically located throughout the city to measure and monitor conditions. For instance, meters measuring electricity, gas, water, traffic sensors, looking at congestion and road conditions, GPS, locating buses and other types of things, weather stations, and a range of sensors that enable us to have a better idea about what the city is doing. So a lot of the current discourse around the smart city relates to the data of the dynamic city. But it's also about how it connects to its citizens, how we can then access that information, how that information can be used to support what's going on in the city. One of the important things is communicating data, and I've chosen to think of that in terms of representation. So recording, representing, and then reimagining. So collecting the data, to mix and match a variety of communications, to engage with the population, to have connectivity everywhere and anywhere, and at any time that people can engage with that information and use that information, and it can be used in a positive type of way. And then lastly, I guess, crunching data, as the Smart Cities Council talks about, is thinking about what that data is and how we can use it in a range of different and changing types of ways, but overall to make better decisions. So it's those areas that I want to talk about, recording, representing and reimagining. But I guess in particular, I want to think about that in terms of the physical environment as against the virtual data and dynamic environment. So to come to that, I'd just like to revisit, if you like, or explore some philosophical understandings of the way that we engage with the world. So, you know, one of the really important, I think, philosophers who wrote about this is Karl Popper, and he had what he describes as a three-world theory. So this is quite an old idea and philosophical understanding, but I think it's one that's really incredibly useful. So first of all, Popper has world one, which is the physical world. So that is all that sits outside of us. You know, it's the things that we can touch, we can see. It's the objects that we engage with in the city, it's the buildings, it's the roads, the cars, and indeed the other people. Popper's second world is what he calls the psychological world, or world two, the world of our feelings, pain, pleasure, thoughts, our perceptions, our observations, the world of our individual mental psychological state. And it's the subjective experience of the world. So it's about the individual. And then the last world, I think, is a really interesting posit, which is the world three, which he describes as the products of the human mind. So such as language, tales and stories, religious myths, scientific conjectures or theories, mathematical constructions, songs, symphonies, paintings and sculpture, but also airplanes and airports and other feats of engineering. But that world of ideas and products of the human mind is also largely the world of data that most typically we're dealing with when we think about a smart city. And indeed, the smart city connotation is around ideas and thoughts and actions and other things. Another way that we might put that is discussed by Yuval Harari in this book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind, where he talks about these things as the objective, the subjective, and the intersubjective. So in his classification, the objective is the physical world. So it's Popper's World One. So it's the things that exist outside of our own perceptions and understanding. It's the things that we believe to be out there, again, the buildings and the physical artifacts of the world. And then the subjective is how individually we perceive those things, how we perceive our friends, how we engage with what's going on. And finally, the intersubjective is the communication and the shared knowledge that we have, and how we engage with others as a community, and how we are able to communicate and think about things. So with the idea of smart cities and interacting with the data of smart cities, most typically when we have that type of discussion, it's around the intersubjective, or the idea of data, the idea of information, the idea of this transient understanding of the world that exists around us. And I think that while that presents an incredibly intriguing and compelling sort of way, and a new way to engage with the city. I mean, we have all sorts of opportunities to experience our cities in different ways, to understand our cities in different ways, and then to change our behaviour in relation to that understanding, or do things in a more interesting or a more sustainable, or a whole range of different types of ways that are afforded by that instantaneous access to information. I think, one of the problems for me is that it potentially makes us lose sight of another part of our world. So, I've looked at those classifications and I've described them in these two sorts of terms. What we largely might regard as static, which is the city as physical artifact, though, of course, the physical circumstance of the city is never quite static. It's changing all the time as well. And then the more dynamic things, the things that are going on, the movement of people through space, the changing of the environment, the change of weather, the change of other types of things. So for today, I'm going to focus more on the city as physical artifact, because I think this is still an incredibly important element of the city. And indeed, I think historically, as architects and planners and people that are concerned with the design and the management of the built environment, we've had to engage with, and it's an incredibly important thing for us to continue to engage with, and not lose sight of the importance of the city as an important place for us to inhabit. The city is an important place that has qualities that benefit our life, that make it a more enjoyable place for us to be. So it's not just about the data, the dynamic aspects of the city, it's about those other sorts of things as well. So city as physical artifact. First of all, in relation to city as physical artifact, I'd like to think about how historically we've recorded the city, thinking about recording. thinking about capturing data or translating information to a format for storage that we can access at any time. So measuring physical properties, social circumstance, but a conceptualized nature of what the physical world is like. But recording historically has been an incredibly important process, an act for architecture and for city making and engaging with the city. So let's look at some of the ways that we have recorded how we engage with the city in the past. And also representing. So recording and representing are hand in hand to a degree. In the process, simply in the process of representing, in reconstructing data and presenting it so that others can view that information and engage with that information, we already change the nature of the information that we're engaging with. So, you know, we historically have had a range of codified documents and artifacts that we use to represent through the recording process the qualities of the city and the physical qualities of the things that I'm talking about here. So we've had physical models, we have maps, plans, and other representations. And now, and the thing I think that's interesting about our smart cities and the cities of the future is we have virtual models and systems that enable us to engage with the cities in different types of ways. So just to look at some of the things that we've done historically, you know, some of the earliest ways that we have recorded qualities of our built environments are maps. So this is a map from 1160 BCE. So a map that's nearly or more than 3,000 years old. And it was originally prepared on papyrus. And there's just fragments of it that you can see here now, but you can see snaking through the map a river and other types of elements. But maps have historically been an incredibly important way of recording things. So this is another extraordinarily old map from 700 to 500 BC from southern Iraq. And what this map is showing is codifying aspects of the environment. So it's not attempting to be an accurate, scaled physical representation of the environment, but it's trying to give meaning to the mythological world that existed at that time. Other really important ways that we've recorded aspects and thought about aspects of the environment are physical models. So the timber model on the right is thought to be the oldest in existence timber model of an architectural project for part of our city. So of St. Peter's in Rome from the 17th century, and an elevation on the left from that same period. And a very famous map in Western history is this map known as the Nolli map, developed by Giambattista Nolli. And what this map shows is space rather than just a representation of the qualities of the building. So the buildings themselves, and particularly the private parts of buildings, are all blacked in. So this is the basis for what we have known as a figure ground drawing. So while we wouldn't regard any of this today as being part of the smart city project, the reality is that we have always historically looked to interpret the qualities of the city and represent the qualities of the city in a way that we can use those artifacts and that information to be able to make in the future, first of all, understand, but make in the future better environments, places that offer opportunities for the people that live there. So as I said, the Nolly is the basis of what we have called figure ground, and what has been historically a really important and intriguing way of thinking about space. This is another really extraordinary representation, not of the city per se, but of Napoleon's. It's a graphic that's been used to represent Napoleon's winter campaign going into to Moscow. So I don't know whether you can see. Can you see my mouse? Can anyone tell me if they can see the mouse location?
I cannot see. Please
You
move
can't see
your
the
mouse.
mouse?
I cannot see the mouse.
Okay. Okay. Well, on the left of the bottom graphic, the very wide part of the brown strip that runs across the page is a representation of the number of soldiers that started with Napoleon when he left France to head to Moscow. And on the right-hand side of the lower chart, you might be able to see that it says Moscow in the top right-hand corner of the lower rectangle. And as Napoleon advanced towards Moscow, the number of troops slowly diminished and the line gets thinner. And then the black line underneath it is the number of troops returning to France. And you can see in the bottom left how very thin that line is, because they all, so many of them died and were killed in the campaign and were frozen on their way back to France. Other really important representations from history. This is from a survey of Egypt, and trying to record and understand all the fantastic architecture from Egypt. And that led to the development, one of the ways they were able to do that in that scientific expedition to understand and record the city and the environments from Egypt, was the development of this engraving machine. So this engraving machine was developed by a French engineer, Nicolas Conti, who was also originally the designer and the developer, the person that invented the lead pencil. So, the way we record and understand things changes over time. Now, today we're starting to have new approaches to how we record and represent things. So one of the really interesting aspects of this is 3D modeling. So one of the it's a website, but it's also a repository for three-dimensional models, is a site called Sketchfab. So many of you might be familiar with Sketchfab, but Sketchfab originally started as a site where designers of video games could post their three-dimensional models, and other people could then come and access those models and buy those models. But if you visit the Sketchfab site, you can see the little hand at the bottom of this model. In real time, you can manipulate this model, you can move around it, you can move into it and do other things. But now there are thousands and thousands of models on Sketchfab, including models of buildings, models of parts of cities, and so on. So this is a model of the Radisson Royal Hotel in New York. But you can purchase a copy of this model, and then you can insert it. I guess in the game of video gamers, into your video game, but for developers or architects or city planners, they can use this model in their investigations about the nature of the city and the qualities of the city they might be visiting and looking at. One of the other things that's starting to happen on the Sketchfab site is there's a whole range of different types of institutions that are starting to put their museum collections and things on the site. So one of those is the California Academy of Science, and it's putting all its skeletons from its collection onto this site. So you can see here a range of skulls from different animals. So on the left, a wombat, a monkey, and then a red kangaroo. But the Sketchfab site enables you to go in and find out a significant amount of detail about these different types of animals and use them. So I've used the example here of Sketchfab, but and a museum that's using it to represent animals, but there are starting to be now some institutions that are, as I showed before, putting up models of parts of the city or whole parts of the city. But it's an extraordinary site where you can even have an app on your phone that you can see these elements and engage with these three-dimensional components that are recorded and represented on this site. In the same sort of way, a number of years ago now, I think the first time I visited was in 2015, with colleagues and students from Diponegoro University. We've done some three-dimensional mapping of parts of Semarang, and in particular, Kodalama. So I won't spend too long looking at this, but it's really fantastic to be able to look at the sort of historical circumstance of the city and look at how it was founded, look at the original architecture and construction and morphology of the city, and be able to see how it's evolved over time in a variety of different types of ways. Starting originally, of course, from the fortifications that were built there. So, these are maps of the city. You can see the original fortification. And then the map on the right is, of course, of Kodalama as it came to be, with the fortifications extending around the perimeter of the city, of the central area. And these are later maps of central Semarang and Kodalama, but you can see Kodalama in the center there, and you can see its relationship to this map from the 17th century of that precinct. Though with our convention today, where we have north up the page, the original map had north down the page. So I've flipped the map around here so we can see that map of Kodalama, and we can see this relationship between that original piece of the city and the existing piece of the city now, and the still existing road patterns that are there. So again, we can see where the original fort was on the left, then the secondary fortified area on the right, and then you'll all be familiar with the qualities of the buildings and the fantastic historical inheritance of the built environment of this precinct, with the buildings that exist today but have existed there and been there for centuries now. So when we first visited in 2015 and then again in 2017, we've started a project, and I must guiltily admit we still have a fair way to go with it. Started a project of recording three-dimensionally this environment, really trying to capture the qualities of the place, and be able to prepare a model, a three-dimensional model, a virtual three-dimensional model that could be used in the planning process, in the development process, to understand and look at the types of issues that were problematic for the city, including the flooding, and look at how that might be used. So this, it looks like a rather scraggly set of black lines, but this is from the original scans back in 2015 of the Kodalama precinct. But I think importantly and interestingly, you can really, I might just go back there. You can really see how the morphology of that precinct has been preserved. And while this looks like this black scraggly line, it is actually a three-dimensional point cloud model that accurately records the dimensions and sizes and location and the physical circumstance of this environment. And particularly in a sort of case like Kodalama, where there often are no other types of records of the environment, and certainly a few survey records of the complete environment. I think these types of virtual models rather, and these point cloud models can become incredibly useful in terms of managing and thinking about the sorts of qualities of the environment. And being able to then look at what you might do in the future, look at what needs to be preserved and how that might be preserved. So these are street elevations from the precinct with the church in the middle, the park to the right, as we look to the north along Jalan Lecen in Kodalama. So reimagining. I guess the first part of these sorts of processes and it is the recording and representing, but really, I guess, and indeed, this is the real value of the smart city approach is having tools and having information and having understandings that enable us to imagine new futures, change futures, to give us opportunities to better manage environments. So, as I said at the beginning, while a significant part of the current discourse around smart cities relates to the changing dynamic data of the city and places, I think for us as custodians of the built environment and people that contribute to the changing quality of the built environment, being able to have tools that enable us to better engage with that built environment as we think about its futures are really important. So I think the next thing that I want to show you is an example from Brisbane, which is a short video, and you'll have to let me know if this is working okay, because whether you've got enough bandwidth, it's a relatively low resolution video, so I hope it'll have enough bandwidth for you, but we'll see how it goes. But it's a video of the modelling in Brisbane of the whole city that is now used in the processes that the Brisbane City Council uses to undertake modelling and to undertake development assessment, to undertake ways of looking at the future of the city and how the city might change. So let's see how this goes.
Welcome to Virtual Brisbane, Brisbane City Council's computer-generated 3D model of the city. Keep watching to learn how this innovative technology helps Council plan for our growing city. Virtual Brisbane is a spatially accurate and interactive 3D model of the city's CBD and inner 5 kilometres. It allows council planners to analyse proposed developments and planning scenarios in greater detail and make more uniform decisions about how our city grows. By animating a proposed development in Virtual Brisbane, our planners can view it from an unlimited range of aspects, including ground level, mid-height and bird's eye views. We can vary the time of day and assess the impacts of height, orientation and design on the surrounding area. We can also consider other scenarios like adding extra parks and trees to support new development and test what impacts development might have on local infrastructure networks. Virtual Brisbane can also help residents better understand the future of their neighbourhood and city and have their say. By using Virtual Brisbane, our planners are able to show residents planning scenarios for their local neighbourhood in a 3D environment, much better than sketches or artist impressions. For more information on Brisbane City Council's Virtual Brisbane, call 07 3403 8888 or visit www.brisbane.qld.gov.au.
Was everyone able to see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so no problem with the streaming there. That's fantastic. So, you know, this is a circumstance that I guess is becoming incredibly common around the world, where these types of models are being developed and enabling us to better understand the city. And one of the things that I think is really intriguing about the development of these types of models, and I must admit I don't have some information about it with me here, or I have information, but I don't have any other videos of it, is starting to enable these models to become what I would call dynamic smart models. So certainly around the world, and certainly in Australia and certainly in Brisbane, there's a range of developers that are developing software for these models where you can input information that will dynamically change other aspects of the model. So, for example, in relation to say transport planning, you can look at the potential impact of adding a train station within the city and allowing the model to generate a new density, a new three-dimensional density profile for that part of the city. Or you can look at the impact of changing traffic conditions, about how it will potentially change aspects of the model. So while, and again, I keep emphasising this issue, while we can look at a range of information in relation to the city in terms of data mining about weather conditions or the number of people that might be there, I think it remains an incredibly important and central focus for us as designers, as people that engage with the built environment, to continue to use these types of models of the physical world and look at how we can make those virtual models and how that we can use those virtual models in our consideration of new ideas for the city and so on. I think another really fantastic aspect of virtual modelling of the city environments, and this is something that I'm showing you now, is providing people with the opportunity to visit, if you like, environments without actually physically having to go there. So it offers us a new way of engaging with places. So this is an example from Suzhou in China, where in these gardens, which obviously you do go to physically, there's a series of spaces where you can climb into these little virtual cabins, like the cabana on the bottom left here, and you put on your virtual goggles, and not only can you visit the gardens in a contemporary sense, you can go back in time. So in this particular case, the gardens have been captured as a three-dimensional model using laser scanning, constructing elements with CAD tools, and constructing elements using photogrammetry, enabling you to have a virtual experience of the garden in history. So again, the use of modelling and capture of physical environments allows a whole range of other types of ways that we might engage with those spaces. One of my particular interests is in relation to urban heritage. So I think this forms an incredibly important part of our urban environments, and indeed UNESCO has clearly understood and written about this. So back in 2016, UNESCO published this report, Culture, Urban Future, which is about cultural heritage for sustainable urban environments. And I'll just read this quote from UNESCO here. Urban heritage, including its tangible and intangible elements, is a key social, cultural, and economic asset for cities. Inexorably place-based, it constitutes a dynamic layering of heritage values, created, interpreted, and shaped by successive generations over time. The tangible or material heritage of cities, objects, monuments, industrial areas, natural landscapes, infrastructures, and historic centres and neighbourhoods enriches the culture of communities as markers of history and for creating and transferring a sense of place to new generations. So to be able to manage and engage and preserve and protect these places, being able to record and document the qualities and the characteristics of these places is incredibly important. And I think new tools for modelling around scanning and photogrammetry enable us to do this more quickly, more efficiently, and more accurately, and more evocatively than we have been able to in the past by simply doing drawings. So one of the new abilities of these processes really supports the preservation of that urban culture. You know, historically, we've had places like the Library of Congress in the United States that has had a program called the Historic American Building Survey, where there are hundreds of thousands of measured drawings that are being prepared to record the physical environment of cities in the United historic places in the United States. But I think, you know, now we have an opportunity to have an enhanced record, and this is where smart cities can come in. So we now have, you know, an extraordinary process where we're recognising World Heritage and recording World Heritage. So, you know, these are the UNESCO and ICOMOS, very important in this sort of process to look at the physical environment. So it's all heritage, not just cities, but the heritage from cities, I think, is an incredibly key aspect of this work, particularly because around the world, and particularly in countries like Indonesia, where there's a huge growth in the size of cities and a huge transition and migration of population to cities, these types of places are really under threat, and these new tools can really help. Another organisation in this process is a group called SIARC, who have started a digital online repository that enables people to record places, and then they can be recorded for and held for posterity, for the future generations in their archives, so that we have a permanent digital record of the physical places. And this, in many cases, is proving to be incredibly important. I mean, one of the really interesting SIARC cases, and while this isn't an urban environment, it's certainly a settlement in Africa. So this is the royal tombs of Kasubi in Uganda. And SIARC had a project in 2009 and 2010 to digitally record these tombs. And you can see here some of the modelling of these tombs, these buildings. But these buildings were partially destroyed by fire in 2010. And without any other records of these environments, the SIARC documentation, which had taken place just before the partial destruction of these environments, enabled them to be rebuilt because it provided that archival place and storage. There's other new sites that are starting to collect and collate this data. Open Heritage is an important one, which also keeps archival and open access material that enables us to visit these sites. So this is an example, again, not an urban one, but of Scott's hut in the Antarctic, and which was slowly being destroyed by the really extreme weather and climatic conditions of Antarctica. You know, it's no longer occupied, but it was a ruin in Antarctica. And by recording this three-dimensionally using laser scans and photogrammetry, the hut is at least preserved digitally, though now that work has enabled there to be action to preserve the physical artefact as well. And there are groups that are taking a very active role in this process. So, you know, one of the really interesting groups and really active groups has been Historic Environment Scotland, who've undertaken a lot of this work. Okay, the last project that I wanted to talk about, and a lot of the stuff around the city, I think, relates to the larger scale, but I think it's really important that we also come down to a smaller scale and we start to think of individual buildings and development. So over the last couple of years, I've been heavily involved in starting a project to look at historic villas in China. So I have a colleague at Tongji University in Shanghai, and we have started a project looking at a sequence of historic villas. We had our first book published last year, which was about a garden called the Heiyuan Garden, which is in a city called Yangzhou, which is on the Yangtze River, just to the west of Shanghai. And it's in a central city area. And the photo on the right shows a sort of aerial view of the gardens, the villa complex. I mean, the Chinese, or the translation of the Chinese is gardens, but as you can see, it's really more a complex of built elements and courtyards and so on. But this particular villa and garden complex is in the center of Yangzhou. I've probably should be showing you the buildings around it, but the city is growing and encroaching on this site. The gardens and the villas were primarily built and constructed in the Qing dynasty, so not hundreds and hundreds of years old, but from the mid 18th century, these buildings and this site was developed. But it's been developed and changed over time. It's been used and owned by very many different groups in China, including the military at different periods in its history. Originally it was developed by a tea merchant, and it's on Yangzhou, is on the Hangzhou Beijing Canal. So it was in the center of a very prosperous trade route in China, and it's a really significant and important site, cultural heritage site. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people a year visit this site, and there's never really been a significant investment in time and effort to have clear and concise and accurate documents of the set of buildings here. So our project was to, first of all, completely record the site. And for this project, we used laser scanners, or a laser scanner in particular, as a stationary laser scanner. And over, well, it was over a couple of years, but the actual amount of time on site was really just a few days, about a week in total, about a working week in total, about 5 working days, where we scanned the site, and there's over 200 individual scans that were compiled to develop a three-dimensional model of this site, which now can be used in a variety of ways. The model has been provided to the custodians of the garden, to the Chinese or authorities and managers of the garden, so they can use the modelling in terms of thinking about maintenance, thinking about activities, thinking about any changes that might take place in the garden. We've used the documentation to try and look a little bit more at the history of the garden, look at the qualities of the space. It's provided an extraordinary new tool to understand the garden, and to be able to visualize it in ways that simply were impossible in the past. And it's also enabling that material to be accessed by people who perhaps can no longer visit the garden. So there's those types of opportunities, and really opportunities that we still really haven't imagined about what can be utilised and done with this garden and with this space and with the documentation in particular. So, you know, some of the really intriguing things about it, the plan on the left, and you can see this patchwork of courtyards and buildings. The grey areas are typically the external spaces. Some of the white areas, the irregular shaped white areas are typically water features within the garden. But some of the white areas are the solid bits of building that, you know, you can't scan. And on the right-hand side, the scan is converted to a point cloud, a coloured point cloud that represents the different heights of the land. So the light blue are the higher parts, and the red is the lowest part of the site. So there are qualities that previously couldn't be discerned easily from the types of drawings and survey actions that were completed in the past, whereas now we can see very clearly the change in height across the site, the change in elevation across the site, and that becomes incredibly important when thinking about setting up processes to avoid flooding in extreme weather events and those types of things. But a really clear indication of the way new information can be found. One of the things that personally I'm also interested in, I think, you know, these processes offer us a new opportunity to think about ways that we represent things. So, you know, this is not an area around Yangzhou, but it's a Chinese ink brush landscape painting, and it has a you know, really beautiful, I think, quality to it, where probably the focus of this representation of the landscape is on a feeling. It's a focus on creating a subjective representation and engendering an emotive, subjective response to the landscape. And I think one of the intriguing things about the laser scanning, so this is a section through one of the gardens, is it offers a way of equally, particularly at this sort of scale, equally creating a play between the objective and the subjective. So this has photographic qualities about it, but equally it's an orthographic projection, but it also captures the vegetation in a really extraordinary way. It captures the detail of the rock structures, the rock gardens in the garden, and, you know, in the centre, the greeny leaves, the moving leaves of bamboo that are in the garden. So there are ways that we can engage with and use this material in very different ways than what we have done historically. It offers a whole range of new ways, I think, of being able to interpret and to use these things. So, you know, so while I'm showing you these two-dimensional projections, these are in fact slices from a 3D model. So in the same way that you might take a 2D projection, an elevation or a section from a CAD model, these are slices from a three-dimensional virtual point cloud that is accurate to around about a centimetre over the 100 metres or so dimensions of the garden. And this is a section right through the garden, from the entry, through the pavilions, through the different parts of the building. But again, capturing an extraordinary level of detail, but also capturing that in this really, I think, beautiful and evocative way that starts to give a feeling and sense of the garden. You know, my forays into this area are still relatively limited, so we don't have a lot of three-dimensional material generated from these things. Yeah, three-dimensional moving material or three-dimensional models. We haven't put any three-dimensional models into any of the archives where you can manipulate them in a 3D kind of way. But some beautiful spaces. And I think, you know, it enables you to interrogate these spaces and imagine these spaces in ways that you simply couldn't do before. I mean, it's impossible to think of how you might have ever done a measured drawing of this type of space, you know, capturing the vegetation and capturing the detail of the rock formations and so on. You know, this really does allow an extraordinary way to engage with that space. And one of the really fantastic things, and many of you may be using these techniques already, is being able to import this data into CAD programs so that you can, there are bits of software now and programs now that will convert these point cloud files into vector drawings, but I must admit the software is still incredibly crude. You know, my experience is that you're still better off importing the point cloud directly and then using your CAD program to insert elements and draw over it. But it will import a scaled model, point cloud model into, you're able now to import a scaled point cloud model into most CAD programs, and then you know, use the CAD processes to engage with these environments and to look at changes or other types of things, new ideas about these environments. And this is, and you're able again to focus on particular elements, look at particular elements in different types of ways, which I think is quite an extraordinary opportunity. So what I'd like to just do in terms of wrapping up is just to think about, you know, the opportunities we have and think about what the city is like. So, you know, the city is real. The city remembers. You know, I think the city is the most important cultural artifact of the inhabitants of the city, of any culture. You know, cities are these extraordinary places that embody our memories, embody our feelings, that establish in many respects how as a community we view and engage with the world. And in that respect, I think, you know, cities need to be tended with care and creativity. So the opportunities of the smart city are really that we can better record, archive the physical presence and dimensions of those environments, and particularly be thinking about environments that might change or be lost not necessarily through deliberate action, but perhaps through climate change, perhaps through rising sea level, perhaps through other adverse impacts from extreme weather events, or indeed, fire or other types of things. So I think thinking about the smart city in terms of the physical artifact and the way that we can record and the way that we have tools to recreate those environments that we can use to help us to understand and reveal the history, to enable us to recreate and reimagine the past, but also to use those tools to think about the future and have models and tools to dynamically engage and test our ideas and imagination around future environments. I mean, I think it's an extraordinary time and opportunity to be not just thinking about data, but really continuing to value and to look at how we can keep, how we can preserve, and how we can make better the physical environments that we already had, the cities that we already have. So that really finishes the formal part of this presentation. So I'd really be very happy to have some conversation and questions. What I wasn't quite sure what timing we were actually aiming for.
Pardon?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. So look, I'm very happy to take any questions, to have some
Okay.
discussion around this.
Mm-hmm. Is there any question for Professor Sutter? Hello? Who want to raise your hand first?
Harus ada yang tanya.
Ada yang tanya enggak? Silahkan, ayo. Enggak ada?
Sementara belum.
Belum ada? Bu Yanti mau tanya, Bu Yanti?
Saya malah mau ini ya, pertanyaan mungkin tidak, cuman memberikan tanggapan
In
sedikit.
English, please.
Oh ya. Thank you very much, Prof. Shatter. I think your presentation is very amazing for us, who start to learn about smart city. How and in the future we think about how Semarang City can be smart city with has many data. Many data can be collected from many aspects. So from your presentation, I can have a lesson learned. So from Prof. Shatter presented is about the importance of collecting that data physically and also non-physically, and also of
di ruang rapat itu.
And also the values, to develop a smart city by using ICT, I think. And then smart city is also will connect the time, past, present, and future, and can make sure that the human being has a root and a future comfortable place to live, I think. And then by thinking about smart cities, so there will be proper planning of the city by using the ICT thing. So, and the last, I think to make more clear and how we have to collect data, especially for better future of Semarang City. We need more discussion, yeah, with Professor Shatter, and maybe we also need a visit to Professor Shatter's laboratory in Australia, I think, to study more about how to collect data with ICT, I think, yeah. So that is my dream, Professor Shatter. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Look, I mean, I think that, you know, Samarang is a really fantastic city, and it has a really extraordinary heritage and history, both around its colonial past, but the indigenous past, and you know, I think one of the things about a place like Samarang is to try and put in processes, ways that that as you move forward into the future and make a better place, that you do have the tools and the information and the records that enable you to also keep the really important qualities and aspects that it's had historically.
Yes.
So you know, I think this is an ongoing project and a really important project, even in these really difficult times, you know, with COVID. You know, it's so easy, I think, in these sorts of circumstances to be overwhelmed by the immediacy of the threat of our health, of ourselves and our communities, and you know, lose sight of some of those other things that equally require our attention. So yeah.
I think so. I have also think about in the future of our student also need study about how to collect data that can that can useful for to develop the smart city. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it would be. I've certainly talked with many of your colleagues in the past about trying to get some of you to come to Australia, to come to Brisbane, and you know, we could visit the city council and we can see these types of things and projects. So you know, the last couple of years haven't been very conducive to that circumstance, but you know, in the future that would be terrific to have you and your students come here.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe next year. Hope that the pandemic will be over.
Yeah.
We can visit
Well,
it.
I'm not sure that'll be over, but you know, maybe we'll all be a bit safer. We can travel safely even if the pandemic is still around. Yeah. Hopefully Australia will open up by then. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, is there any other questions? Hello, Prof. Ati. See you again. Other question, please.
Yeah.
Prof.
Maybe a comment. Comment from other colleges. I see also Pak Baroto also present here. So doesn't.
Okay. Hi, Satar.
Yeah.
Oh, Atiak.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you for your interesting book. I have received
Did it arrive?
yes, it's very interesting book.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad it arrived.
Okay.
It's great to see you again.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Are you
nice
well?
too. Yes. And you?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, yes. A little bit different for your performance.
Yeah.
Sorry?
A little bit different in
Uh-huh.
performance, maybe because of this situation
Yeah.
from home.
Yes. Yeah, from home.
Okay. Okay.
In my study.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prof. Sater, yeah, I really appreciate for your willingness to join in this program. So
Very happy.
okay. So yeah, it is interesting presentation. Yeah, I think it is a blessing for this situation of the pandemic. I think yeah, so we can share knowledge with
Yes.
this with using the uh, um, technology,
Yeah.
the technology. So I think it's a part of a smart city. I think.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we can share knowledge with a cheap way, with the effective way like this. Yeah. So I think maybe with the Vijayanti suggestion. So maybe we can create uh, the next collaboration, Bu Susi, maybe
Yeah.
yeah, maybe with the online learning system. We can do it with the cheap way and effective way.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we do hope that next time we can discuss it with more detail with Bu Susana, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Very
Okay.
happy to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your share.
Good to talk to you.
Okay. Thank you. Terima
Thank
kasih, Bu
you.
Susi.
Yeah. Ada yang lain? Is there any else who want to ask? No? Maybe I would ask first to Prof. Shatter. I'm very interested in your Indonesian map, Kota Lama's mapping. It's
Yes.
very incredible, yeah. It's very nice. It's very informative data for us actually. Regarding to your map, what do you think about the possibilities of Semarang? Is it possible for creating Semarang as a smart city with that kind of basic you already, that kind of data you have already collected?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, I think that, some of the technology has changed quite a lot, even since we first started to do that work. But, there's a very extensive amount of material there that I think is very useful for thinking about Kota Lama in particular. I didn't show all the material, but there's really a map of most of the precinct now, of the exterior spaces of the streets and so on, that is a three-dimensional point cloud map that could be used. I mean, apart from anything else, it's something that your students could use when they're looking at projects there and how they engage with that space. It provides those long elevations and sections that you can look at the height and scale of things. So, I mean, I think it's very useful in that respect. It provides an accurate survey documentation of the spaces and that area of the city. So yes, very happy to share that with people.
Yeah, I think that's very important because if you come here in Semarang right now, you can see the Kota Lama condition right now. Our situation is really different. Now
Yeah.
Kota Lama is very crowded, full of activities, and some of conservation area. It's already maybe some buildings are already damaged and not and no longer take what you call that conserve.
Yeah.
Everything changes into the new buildings,
Yes.
and yeah, I think this is the most problem in Kota Lama right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. I think it's really um, difficult when there's development pressures to be able to get people to utilize and work with the existing buildings in a positive way. People want to build bigger, shinier, new things, and that can be really destructive of the environment. So I think having documentation is also a way to be able to advocate and to provide an important credibility and quality to those spaces. So I think it's helpful in that respect too.
Ya, oke. Eh, Pak Barato mungkin mau tanya, Pak Bangun, monggo. Pak Nuci, ada yang mau tanya lagi? I I think, yeah,
Can I? Can
yeah,
I? Can
please,
I?
please,
Okay.
Mr.
Yes. Thank you for the research report that Prof. Leigh had present today. But there's a integration, isn't it, from your research with 3D scanning and then modeling? It's related to the government. Sorry. Hello.
Hello,
Is
Prof.
it?
Sutter.
Hello.
Is your research is related to the government, isn't it, for the smart city?
Can you just repeat that? I didn't quite
Sorry.
understand.
Okay. Because in the present video presentation, it's been government to Australia, and then so you integrate your research to government
Project.
project or
At the moment,
regulation, yes.
At the moment, most of the work that we're doing is led by the university. So I didn't show any of the material, but one of the projects that I'm currently working on is in relation to public art and looking at public spaces in Australia around public art. But that work is primarily initiated directly through the university. So we do also have some local governments that are contributing to the work, but it's primarily initiated directly through the university.
So university project. So
a university research project rather than
a
student project.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So,
yeah.
So it's the size, the scale is still project. Try to make foundation for the further smart city for Australia, isn't it? If I'm not wrong.
Yes.
So okay. So the integration is still not the city integration system is still in university, if I'm not.
It depends on the scale. You know, the little video of the city model that I showed you, the virtual Brisbane model. You know, that is a Brisbane City Council, a local government initiated project. But the other projects have been initiated through the university. So they're a little different. Excuse me. I was just looking for an example of where is it? Maybe you'll be able to, if I can share the screen again.
Yes, you can.
You know, one of the projects that I'm working on at the moment is this project. Can I share the screen?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you're the co-host.
Yeah. So
Sure.
share. Can you see this?
Yes.
So if I play this, this is an urban project in Brisbane that we're currently trying to do scanning of. So it was originally a powerhouse. So it was generating electricity for the community. So it's a partially destroyed building that was built in the early 20th century that has now been converted into an arts precinct. So a lot of the existing building is there, but you know, so that's a new entry through one of the walls. Is that working for you?
Yes, it's for.
So,
Yes, working, yeah.
I mean, this is a scan of the exterior of the building and you can sort of see through the building, but we're in the process of scanning all the interior of the building too. But at the moment, it's just a hole. And it sits right on the edge of the river in Brisbane. But the purpose of this work is, again, to have a tool that can be used in the management and development of the project. It also will enable there to be an online virtual three-dimensional model where people can visit the project virtually and so on. So, yeah, you know, these are the types of things that we're currently doing.
So if you put it in the public, so the community can give contribution about this data, isn't it?
Yeah, they will be able to. I mean,
so the concept of smart city is for this project is giving view that can be accessed by public, and so public can be contribute what will do next for the city.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think there's many ways, you know, I mean, for that particular one, it will enable the people to visit the existing project virtually, you know, to go and see the building and be able to move through and understand the building. It will enable the arts community that uses the project to be able to use it in developing, you know, if they're going to have an external concert, you know, they could model the seating or the spaces and put it into that model to see what's going on there. So it's a new tool to enable that creative thinking about the environment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Leigh, for the explanation.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
You are mute, Bu Susi. Bu Susi, you are mute.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Bangun. Prof. Shutter, is it possible for us to get your present materials? Is it possible?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Look, I tried to share it before, but something went wrong. But I'll do it again straight after the session now.
Okay. Or maybe you can send me through email. If
It's
possible.
quite a big file.
Okay. Okay.
So it's probably, I'll share it through Google Drive.
Okay.
So you can just download it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, happy to do that. Happy
Okay.
to do that.
Yeah. Okay. I think.
Susi,
Yeah.
can I ask one question?
Okay. Okay.
I'm very curious about
Yeah.
the
Please.
development of Professor Shatter's research. Prof. Shatter, have you done any collaboration research with other departments such as information and communication technology department to develop new or more innovative technology for collecting data based on your field?
Not very much at the moment, but I'm working with some people in the arts community around this project that we're looking at in relation to public art. So on Thursday, I was going to talk a little bit more about that project too, to show you what was happening with that, thinking about urban design in that respect. Can you just excuse me for a moment? I think there's someone banging at my door.
Yes,
I won't be
yes.
1 second.
Okay. Ada yang untuk itu. Ini tidak ada yang bertanya lagi kah?
Kita resen, Bu.
Oh, mana?
Biar Mas Reza.
Kelihatan Pak Reza resen.
Oh ya. Oke. Baru masuk soalnya di tempatku.
Ada,
Ya.
Bu.
Oke.
Yeah.
Mas
Okay.
Reza.
Sorry about that.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Satter,
It's okay.
for your
Satter.
explanation.
It was my daughter coming home from school.
Oh, that's good. How old is he?
She's 17.
17. And okay. Reza?
Ya, silakan.
Ya, Bu. Thank you, Bu. Good afternoon, Prof. Satter. It's good to see you here, even it's virtually here.
Hi. Yeah.
Okay, I have one question actually. It's related with Prof. Jayanti asking previously. It's related to the use of 3D mapping technology and also the virtual reality that you presented in this moment. Yeah, I do believe that the uses of technology of the 3D mapping and kind of that technology always interesting for the collections data tool, as you mentioned before. But sometimes I'm wondering is the important thing is maybe not on the how we collect the data, but how then we process the data, what we get from the field survey. And I'm wondering to what extent the 3D technology and also the mapping could provide any important data that may be not visible on the physical matters, because I know that the technology has still, as you also mentioned, that the technology has still limitations on the kind of collection data and like the material and the kind of that. And if we do some research like on the urban morphology or any kind of the tracing data from the over time, so how do we how the technology could provide that kind of data? Actually, sometimes I wondering about that, because I know that the technology is only capture the current moment of the physical moments, and how about we can trace the previous data, and also how we can maybe we can predict what will happen in the future.
Sure. Well, look, I think there's still a long way to go to understand all the ways that we might be able to use this technology. I think, you know, a lot of it's in its infancy in that respect. But I think, you know, one of the really interesting things that it that it offers is, and I think a parallel is thinking about photographs historically. You know, I think that in the first instance, you do think of a photograph as simply recording information. But in reality, a photograph starts to enable us to look at things in more detail and in a different type of way. And I think what the 3D scanning does, or photogrammetry does, is it has a sort of photographic quality to it, but it enables us to look at things in a way that we couldn't previously. I mean, one of the things about a photograph, for example, is that it's from one position in space. So it's a perspective, you know, so it changes. I mean, we see the physical form in relation to the rules of optics, the rules of perspective. Whereas once you have a three-dimensional model, and particularly if it's a colorized model with a contemporary scanner, so that it's a 3D model, it's like a photograph, but you can turn it into an orthographic projection. You can you can take a section or part of a section, or you can do horizontal slices and things like that. So you're able to look at the physical environment in ways that you simply couldn't do previously. So, I mean, for example, we don't particularly write about it in our book about the Haiyuan Garden, but there were very subtle changes in the way different bits were built. So, you know, if this was a series of pavilions and gardens that was built at one point in time, you can start to see how the next one actually was built at a changing angles and so on to it that are really quite subtle types of angles. But, you know, you can have a different, see the plan in a way that you simply couldn't see before and people didn't realise. So it provides that opportunity to see things that you couldn't see before. I mean, in the same way that if you have an X-ray or a laser scan, not a laser scanner, an MRI or a CAT scan that cuts through your head, you can see the interior of your head. I mean, you can chop and manipulate the model in ways that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And then you can see qualities. I mean, you still need to have a critical understanding of how things are put together and what some of those things mean, but you can see it in a different way that you simply couldn't do before. So in terms of historical analysis, it's useful in that respect. But it's also, you know, then enables you to value those qualities as you think about what you might do in relation to those spaces for the future. I mean, particularly in an urban environment that's the physical changes are happening all the time. So, you know, there are always people wanting to build new things or, you know, demolish things. So it just enables you to have a tool that enables you to engage with those changes with better knowledge to bring forth, you know, a clearer set of values, I think.
So it depends on how we process the 3D models after the...
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. can it also be used to simulate the data of the 3D model can be used to simulate any kind of any simulations? I mean, like even it energy buildings or any kind of other simulations, maybe. Is it possible for that?
Well, in conjunction with other CAD systems, you know. So, I mean, you know, the typical types of three-dimensional modeling systems like Revit or ArchiCAD or, you know, I don't know, what do you use? What do all the students use in Dipo Nagoro for their three-dimensional modeling? You know, what you can do is you can take the scanned models and put them into those programs and then, you know, manipulate them within those programs and add to them or change them or delete pieces or whatever. So you can do all those sorts of things with the model. So it does enable you to simulate new circumstances to do those sorts of changes and so on.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Professor Tari. I can highlight that it really depends on how we process the 3D models into further research.
Yeah. Look. I mean, it's a tool in that respect, you know, and I think there are many ways that it's open to be used. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Tari. It's very interesting.
I think maybe it's better for Reza to see or to meet Prof. Sutter directly. We have to go to Brisbane and then discuss.
To meet you in person sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's very important, I think, yeah. How to integrate, the 3D mapping presented by Prof. Sutter and the program that our department have. So I think it's very important so that this presentation or this meeting could be really useful for developing our city. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Shutter. And before I close this meeting, this class, maybe I will